The US has ordered an investigation into the origins of COVID-19, but Beijing has dismissed it, saying it shows a disrespect for science. So, can America's intelligence officials succeed where health experts have so far failed? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Adrian Finnegan. Conspiracy theories about the origins of COVID-19 have been circulating since the start of the pandemic that's killed more than 3.5 million people. Speculation that it was caused by a laboratory accident in the Chinese city of Wuhan has now gained currency once again. That's after President Joe Biden ordered US intelligence agencies to find out more. Biden has urged the World Health Organization to launch a second investigation. Earlier this year, a W.H.O. report concluded that the lab theory was extremely unlikely, while acknowledging that its scientists faced difficulties getting access to data from China. We'll bring in our guests in just a moment, but first, a report from Katia Lopez-Horayan.
With more than 50% of U.S. adults now vaccinated, President Joe Biden is turning his focus to the origins of COVID-19. He's given his team 90 days to investigate how and where the virus first emerged. Perhaps most controversially, the report will look at whether the virus was leaked from this Chinese lab in Wuhan.
China needed to provide more access to the lab, cooperate more fully with the scientific investigators, and we don't think that they have met that standard.
Once dismissed as a conspiracy theory, now leading scientists say the possibility of a lab leak should not be ignored.
We're hearing about people who work at the Wuhan Institute of Virology becoming sick with an illness. We know that this has been spreading since November. We've seen the Chinese government been very reticent to allow press to investigate the origins of this virus. We know that Wall Street Journal reporters have been detained by police. We know the BBC has been chased out of certain areas where people are looking for the origin. So I think that raises questions.
Back in March, a joint investigation by China and the World Health Organization concluded the probable source of the virus was animal-to-human transmission from a wet market. An accidental lab leak, it said, was highly unlikely. But many governments have criticized the report's credibility. They say access was limited, and the Chinese government withheld data. They argue China's apparent influence on the WHO has tainted the report's validity. China denies the virus leaked from one of its labs, saying its critics are playing politics.
With 33 million confirmed cases and about 600,000 deaths from COVID-19 in the U.S., which are the highest numbers in the world, the U.S. isn't reflecting on its own problems, but rather attempting to make a scapegoat out of China. My question is, what are they up to? Can they sleep at night with an untroubled conscience?
The Biden administration says knowing the origins of COVID-19 is a matter of global health, a way to stop another pandemic in the future. But the report could have far-reaching consequences that go beyond the health sector. Katia Lopez-Horayan, Al Jazeera.
All right, let's bring in our guests for today's discussion. From Beijing, we're joined by Victor Gao, Vice President of the think tank Center for China and Globalization. From Copenhagen, we have Jeffrey Lazarus, a former WHO official and head of the Health Systems Research Group at the Barcelona Institute for Global Health. And from New York, we're joined by Dr. Hakeem Jabala, a leading virologist and CEO of Karen Therapeutics. A warm welcome to you all. Victor, let's start with you. This week, China said that it would not participate in additional investigations into the origins of the virus by the World Health Organization. Why? Does China have something to hide?
Well, first of all, China has already fully cooperated with WHO. Actually, the cooperation started from the very first week of the discovery of the pandemic in Wuhan in 2020, in early January. And throughout all these months, China worked very closely with WHO, and China was very transparent in welcoming WHO experts, which included many American scientists, to visit Wuhan, and they've already produced their conclusion. Therefore, I think we need to use the WHO conclusion as the guidance rather than, for example, using politics and refuse to put science above everything else. This is the attitude of China. And I will personally propose that we build up a global chronology for all the evidences leading to the outbreak of the pandemic, including many evidences which have been discovered in the United States and in several other countries. Because by looking at all the relevant data and evidence, we will have a better idea as to where truly this virus started.
But Victor, you say that China was very transparent with the World Health Organization investigators. They, as we heard in that report, criticized China for saying that they lacked access to certain places, and access to data. In not cooperating, the optics are that something sinister is going on and that China is hiding something. And adding to that sense of a cover-up was China's treatment of citizen journalists and medical professionals, like the ophthalmologist Dr. Lai, who sought to warn the world about the disease. Again, why silence people if there's nothing to hide? This is all about optics. Why can't China just be open about this? Surely it's in its interest to do so.
Now, I think you need to use the reports by the WHO experts group as the major starting point. And I think in dealing with the virus, every country in the world, including the United States, they have always been very cautious because in dealing with the pandemic, there are many considerations to be reported. And it is particularly true in China in the first weeks of the outbreak because no one knew what exactly this was all about. It was diagnosed as different kinds of diseases and sickness and problems, etc. And it took great courage and pooling of all resources through many parts of China for the scientists to very quickly discover the real nature of this virus. And China took the leadership role of reporting to the WHO the genome sequencing results, which laid the groundwork for scrambling into action for the vaccines by many countries. And I think we need to look at this is the major picture of what China did. And I think China has a very solid track record of fighting off the spread of the virus. And I think many countries should learn from the Chinese success story rather than pointing an accusing finger at China.
Jeffrey Lazarus then in Copenhagen, you heard there, China showed great courage, has a solid track record, it played a leadership role. What are your thoughts on this probe by US intelligence agencies? What could it turn up that isn't already public knowledge? Or is it purely political or a genuine effort to get at the truth?
Well, we heard already from those who were a part of the WHO team that there were issues around having full freedom of movement, that they felt they lacked access to some data. So that raises issues of, what weren't they able to see or what data weren't they able to analyze? And until that's resolved, I think it's going to leave a lot of open questions. So I agree that China opened up the country very early in 2020 to a WHO team. I spent 11 years at WHO, and I remember well that WHO is governed by its member states, and member states often play a role in contributing to reports, into sometimes even approving those reports. So while a lot of great information came out of the report, and while China made the sequencing information available rather quickly, which has been essential for developing vaccines so quickly, I feel that if there's a need to go back and do further investigation, then that should happen. I'm not sure how political it is. I would have thought it was more political maybe under the Trump presidency than the Biden presidency. I think there's a real interest in understanding what happened so that we can protect labs better and so that we can prevent this kind of virus spread in future.
Jeffrey, how important is this investigation in terms of preventing future pandemics? Are governments sufficiently aware now of the dangers after the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think governments have been aware of the dangers for a long time. I mean, we've had, lab accidents earlier. We've had, plenty of other respiratory infections, go to epidemic or even pandemic levels. I mean, we've never seen something like this before. So now there's a real concern that we need to prepare, in future. And we don't know what future investigation will turn up. I mean, I wonder a year and a half later, really how important it is, to continue digging into the origins. But I think if the team felt there was information they need, or if there's a need to go back, then I think that should happen.
Hakeem Jabala, Doctor, good to have you with us on Inside Story. Why is it so important to find out exactly where this pandemic began, to find a patient zero?
I think it's very critical because it's going to help us set in place a roadmap for preparedness for future pandemics and future outbreaks. I think I have to say that this time around, regardless, we have been very lucky that the virus that started this whole mess is known to us, belongs to a family that we had prior experience with, and that has led to a quick development in many aspects. But it remains of utmost importance that we figure out who is patient zero in the Wuhan area. I think the theory of the wet market, no one really believes it. I think the theory of an accident in a lab, I don't believe it either. I've had the opportunity of visiting many labs in China when I was in South Korea, heading the Pasteur Institute there, and I can tell you the security levels at some of their biosafety level 3s are pretty high, really high standards as we have in the United States. So that theory, to me, it's still not holding water yet. But for future preparedness, I think WHO needs to put a roadmap, and it needs to get the buy-in from many countries of how we're going to deal with these emerging diseases moving forward. In my opinion, SARS-CoV-2 is just a warm-up for worse things to come, and for which we're not really that prepared.
So you're fairly confident that this virus did not escape from a lab in China. It jumped from animals to humans. We just don't know where at the moment.
Exactly. I used to run one of the largest biosafety level 3s in Asia, in South Korea, and the South Korean authorities, the Korean CDC, had one of the utmost actually list of boxes to tick to keep the lab operational every year. However, somebody can actually put a vial of the virus in their pocket and walk out with it. And if that happened in China, that's a whole different thing. That's not a leak. That's a criminal act. So we have to start thinking a difference between an accident, which is very hard to do unless you poke yourself purposely with a needle containing the virus, or somebody decided to take a sample of the virus with them in their pocket. That's completely different. And I think for that, even though our colleague from China, I understand his position, but at least one thing that they can be prepared to release or at least provide information on is just during that period where this pandemic started, either October, November, or even December 2019, to try to track down the activities that were going in this institute, and at least figure out if somebody was a disgruntled employee that did something like that. This theory, I actually buy into it. An accident, I'm not too sure.
Victor, what do you make of that?
Well, first of all, I think it will be everyone's benefit if we can find out the real origin of the virus this time around. On the other hand, I think, for example, if we want to find the patient zero for the Spanish flu, the patient zero cannot be found in Spain. It's back in the United States. And that's for historical reason, more than 100 years ago. But it is a very similar situation in Wuhan this time. China did discover this outbreak and took effective measures to fight off the spread of the virus in China. And we need to build up a global chronology basis, collecting all the relevant informations, like, for example, the sudden closure of the Fort Detrick's laboratory in the United States, the e-cigarette incidents, which resulted in many patients getting sick, and their symptoms were very much like the symptoms of a COVID-19 patient, for example. And there are many other evidences in different parts of the world, which I personally believe need to be plugged into this global chronology so that the scientists and the medical doctors can really have enough information to reach very important conclusion with the aim of preventing such spread of the pandemic again in the future. And every country, all of us, will be better prepared. And this should be done on the basis of science and should be done on the basis that this virus is the common enemy of mankind.
Jeffrey, I'll come back to you in just a moment, but I want to give Dr. Jabala a chance to answer that. I think what Victor was hinting at there is that the virus may not have started in China at all. Doctor, what do you make of that?
This has been the Chinese position all along, and I think scientifically we completely refute it. Every country where we had a chance to sequence the virus, it had so much identity to the Wuhan sequence. And that rules out all this e-cigarette and all the other theories that the Chinese authorities have come up with since actually January 2020. I think patient zero, we are in a completely different world to the Spanish flu. And as an example, when I was in South Korea, it didn't take us very long to identify patient zero during the outbreak for the MERS virus. The same goes to Saudi Arabia. So with China, with Wuhan, with all the development that China has accomplished, I think it would have been much easier to get us to patient zero. Here is a little a strategy for our colleague from China. If China feels very confident about everything it has done so far, they have no reason not to allow us access to the ophthalmology clinic where Dr. Lai used to work. And many of us strongly believe that the cluster or the center point of the pandemic started there. And if that's the case, then there is no reason why they shouldn't release the information of what happened there. Because throughout the Wuhan, and from the information we got from several scientists in China, and we haven't heard from them, unfortunately, since January 2020. We don't know where they are held. We don't know whether they're even still alive. And that's actually gets to the point of what is China hiding. If what our colleague from China is saying is true, there is no reason not to release just the information from this clinic so we can understand the clinical manifestations that were presented from the months of September, October, November 2019.
Okay, Victor, again, we come back to the optics of this. If China has nothing to hide, why is it being obstructive?
No, I don't think China is being obstructive. China does not welcome people with vested interest in accusing China or try to hold China responsible for this pandemic. That's what China is firmly opposed to. China wants to oppose those people who refuse to put science above everything else and who wants to really shirk their own responsibility for their failure of containing the virus in their own country and also leading to so many deaths of the good-hearted American people, almost 600,000 of them. That's, I think, the shame that we witness in the world. Now, talking about the incidents before the outbreak in Wuhan, I think the WHO should really organize an investigation into the 5 American military athletes who attended the military game in Wuhan several months before the outbreak and who reported sick to the Jinyingtan Infectious Disease Hospital. Their samples and their medical records were kept in China, and they were all of a sudden airlifted, sent back to the United States. What happened to them? What's their condition after they went back to the United States? I hope WHO should really look into this particular situation.
Let me
and
bring
the United States should cooperate with the WHO as much as China has already cooperated with the
Victor,
WHO.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I have to give Jeffrey an opportunity to speak here, and time is pretty tight. Jeffrey, what do you make of what you just heard there? What about the World Health Organization's handling of this epidemic and the investigation into its origins? How has it performed? Is it doing what it's designed to do?
Well, we know, and I hear in this conversation, that it is getting and has been, very political. WHO was asked by its governing body to send an international team in and investigate, and they did. And there were reports, as I mentioned, that they didn't have all the access they wanted, and in the latest report, that they didn't receive all the data they wanted. So WHO, does not enter a country without the permission of that country, and it, in the handling of this pandemic, it's working in close collaboration with the the government focal points from around the world, particularly those most affected. So I think they've been doing a great job, from the beginning of announcing that this is a public health, an emergency of public health concern. That they rather quickly found that there was human-to-human transmission. Some people think it went too slow, but it was within weeks of the first investigation. But it's governments who are putting up obstacles. It's governments who didn't want to declare the pandemic, and WHO has its hands tied when it goes into a country. It can send the best experts, which I think it's been doing, but if they don't have all the access they want, they're not going to be able to get the job done. And we heard if China has nothing to hide and WHO says they'd like to go back, or other governments feel that there's a need for further investigation, then I think it should happen.
Victor, I need a brief answer from you, if you can. Does China view this investigation, this intelligence gathering operation announced by the Biden administration this week as purely political? What is it likely to do to China-US relations?
Well, this would be bad for China-US relations. And I think this is really refusing to put science above everything else. It's putting intelligence above science. And President Trump, in his administration, tried and failed. And I believe Mr. Biden will try and fail again.
Dr. Jabala, how likely is this inquiry to lead to nothing but a dead end, do you think, given that it's intelligence-based? It's not going to have people on the ground in China.
I am of the opinion, and I think some of my colleagues are of the same opinion, that at least members of the G20 countries had this low to moderate intelligence back in December 2019. And based on that alone, I don't think what President Biden has asked for will shed any more light than what we know. And I agree with my colleague from China. It's going to just turn this into a very, very uncomfortable tennis game between China and the United States. I think now I believe two things perhaps could happen. One, WHO, with all due respect, lost its credibility, and they should no longer be involved in any investigation. I think they should be kept out of this. And two, I think we should think of really starting a new forum composed mainly of international experts around the world, with the idea of them going to China or even to other countries, be on the field, go to labs, talk to people, go to hospitals, and then they can come up with, once and for all, I am not looking for the proof as such. I'm looking for a roadmap that's going to help us to be better prepared in the future. And the way things have been going under the Trump administration and now under President Biden's administration will not help us, and I don't believe it's science-driven. I think the intel has been known for a while. It hasn't really shed any light on anything that we know so far about what happened there.
And Jeffrey Lazarus, what do you make of that? The WHO shouldn't be involved in any future investigation into the origins of the virus.
I disagree. I think WHO should continue to be involved, but I also agree in the importance of building a roadmap. We saw that WHO had a lot of challenges in addressing this pandemic, and I think the world knows that now pandemic preparedness is one of our absolute most important health issues, in the world and moving forward. So we're going to need to possibly have a new institution or new ways for current institutions to work and to be more effective. We've seen it before with the Global Fund. We've seen it with the Gavi Alliance, organizations that were set up in some ways to fill in for shortcomings in existing organizations and agencies.
Gentlemen, we are out of time. Many thanks indeed for being with us, Dr. Hakeem Jabala, Victor Gao, and Jeffrey Lazarus. As always, thank you too for watching. Don't forget you can see the programme again at any time just by going to the website aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, join us at our Facebook page. You'll find that at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can join the conversation on Twitter, our handle @AJ Inside Story. From me, Adrian Finnegan, and the whole team here in Doha. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again. Bye for now.